We're getting ready to get started, so please take your seats, please. And good afternoon. Thank you for coming today. I'm Diana Gutman, and it's my pleasure and my privilege to be the leader president of the DMA League this year. For those who may not have heard of us before, we are an a la carte part of membership in the museum. And we've been around for 85 years, which most people don't seem to realize. And if you have any other questions, the people wearing the name tags and so forth are on the board of directors, so just ask us. Our mission is education, fundraising, and volunteerism. Today we add health, brain health to be exact. So I would like to introduce 𝗛𝗲𝗏𝗶𝗴. She's the immediate past president of the League. And wearing a different hat today, she is the event chair and coordinator for this event. She's going to tell us, for you new arrivals to the League, a little bit about Bonnie Pitman. So, Tara?
Good afternoon. I'm so thankful everybody is here today on a cooler spring day. It is my honor to introduce Bonnie Pitman today. Bonnie is currently the Director of Art Brain Innovations at the Center for Brain Health and is a distinguished scholar in residence at the Edith O'Donnell Institute of Art History at UT Dallas. In addition to being a former director of the Dallas Museum of Art, she has been a curator, educator, and administrator in numerous museums throughout the United States. Bonnie is a national leader in education and the engagement of art. As Director of Brain Health Innovations at UT Dallas Center for Brain Health, Bonnie expands her research and teaching of the art of observation, meditation, and compassion. Her Power of Observation initiative connects neurological research with the experience and process of seeing, looking, and observing. A complete list of Bonnie's publications is too numerous to mention today. However, one of her books, Ignite the Power of Art, Advancing Visitor Engagement in Museums, is notable as it focuses on the research and programs that were implemented during Bonnie's tenure at the Dallas Museum of Art. Articles about Bonnie's work have been published in the Journal of American Medicine, the New York Times, San Antonio Medicine, and the Dallas Morning News, just to mention a few. Please help me in welcoming Bonnie Pitman.
Thank you all for coming out on such a beautiful day. I am so excited to be here, and I first want to start off by thanking the League. I worked with them extensively when I was here at the Dallas Museum of Art, and notable pieces in the museum's collection should be highlighted. Very importantly, they've been supportive of education, including endowing positions in the education department and supporting major exhibitions. The League is a lifeline to the museum and part of the life of the museum with the volunteer efforts. And we are so grateful for your connection to the community and for your support of the DMA. Today, I'm going to share with you sort of my thinking and the work that I've done since I left the DMA. I retired from the museum in, I think it was 2012. I can't honestly remember, but it was too long ago. And I turned my attention towards a new field, which is art and medicine. And that had a lot to do because of my chronic illnesses, but very importantly, because it was a new insight on the way art can be an important part of healing. And since then, I've done a number of lectures at UT Southwestern, at Baylor. I teach classes over at the UT Southwestern Medical School. I do seminars for the different faculty over there. The one coming up this spring is with the neurology fellows and residents and faculty at UT Southwestern. So every year, new opportunities arrive, and I learn new things about art and medicine. Why I think it's important is that the healing power of art, this lecture is really divided into three parts. One is the importance that's been recognized, that art does contribute to the healing. The history of medicine in art, it's an incredible story, and we're just going to get little glimpses of that. And finally, a fly-through, and I do mean a fly-through, of artists who have had different illnesses and how that has impacted their art and how the art has helped to heal them. So I had 6 slides in this area in the initial run of this presentation, but had to cut so many. I decided to just stay with the World Health Organization because they summarize beautifully the power of art. Art doesn't cure a person. That's very important to understand. But what art can do is heal. And there are so many different ways in which it can contribute to the healing process, both for the individual who is creating, that could be an artist or a person, any person that's in a hospital. Baylor has a huge program that deals with poets and musicians and artists in the patient's rooms to help with the healing process. It's very important to realize that that creative talent that is in all of us can make a difference in the ways in which we can heal. The World Health Organization, UNESCO, the Center for Disease Control, all have put out papers and reports on the important role the arts, and I do mean the arts, music, dance, theater, as well as the visual arts, play in the life of a patient, as well as in the life of clinicians. What are some of the benefits of healing and the arts? I picked this in 𝗛𝗲𝗄𝗃 and from the Dallas Museum collection, and most of the works that I'll be illustrating this program with will be from the DMA collection because you have an encyclopedic one that tells an incredible story. But as you can see up there, one of the most important things is that when you are creative, it releases dopamine, which can help with your depression and anxiety. And the creative process is one that is illustrated both by the maker of the work of art, but it can also be by observing or participating in the arts. And there's a whole list up here which you can read. The second aspect of this, which I think is so important in thinking about the healing power of art, is the engagement with communication. So often when a patient is trying to recover, when asked that fatal question, "How do you feel today?" They'll always respond with, "I'm fine, I'm fine. Everything's fine." And that is not necessarily true. You are not in a hospital when you're fine, Randy pointed out to me one day. He said, "You're not fine, so tell me how you really feel." So learning to communicate about your illness and about how you can describe it and also in some cases paint it or sing it, is very, very important to the healing process. And in a most positive sense, arts can improve our healing and our responding to the world around us. There's an entire history of medicine in art, and when I put this lecture together, I realized I should really do a series of 6 lectures on the history of art. So you're just getting the quick overview today, because one is about the whole history of art and its presentations from Paleolithic times to the present, whether it's the great Venus Willendorf, who is in her fecund disease standing there looking at us, and that notion of bearing children, of carrying forward the species, meaning the human species in this case, was important to the artist who made this all those years ago. And we're looking at over 24,000 years ago. And So that desire to create is innately human, as I've already mentioned. On the caves of Lascaux and on the painted caves around the world, you'll always find scenes of animals sometimes killing people and other times being killed. But that notion of exchange between the human and the animal is an important one, and in many cases we can see the illustrations of how the person can be recovered. The Egyptians were phenomenal. They did surgeries all over throughout their history, and we can see here a cataract surgery going on. Well, you know, I hate to tell you this, you're just asleep when they do it to you today. So that's exactly what they do, only they may be using lasers. But here they were using real tools. And you can see the host of instruments that have been found in different tombs around Egypt. They know that they did brain surgery, they did amputations, they did all kinds of interventions to help heal and the various workers and lords and kings throughout Egypt. And it was very important to have this documented. And we often find singular tombs to the great physicians in Egypt. Skipping ahead, and I do mean skipping, there's so many things I wish I could tell you, but to the Greek and Roman era, we know, of course, about Hippocrates, the great Greek physician and philosopher, who in 460 BC became called the father of medicine. And he is credited with separating medicine from magic. And that was in establishing the first school of medicine. And so even today, the physicians take the Hippocratic Oath. There are countless statues of him that are around, that can be found in different museums. And another thing that is wonderful to look at in detail are the paintings and sculptures that the Greeks did of actually curing a patient. And the one on my side, I get left and right mixed up, so I'll say my side, that side, to help us all. But here you see a warrior who is being bandaged up. And in this case, there's some speculation that the person who is doing the bandaging was a woman physician. And that was very common in Greece because of the need for the men to fight in the battles, and the women were very important. Again, we could chronicle the entire history of medicine and see different advancements, but we're skipping to a new category, which are the healing deities. And throughout the world and over time, there are many deities or gods and goddesses, whichever phrase you would like to use, that represent these traditions of the healing power of that particular faith or practice. From our collections upstairs, the green Tara is an extraordinary example of this Tibetan image of a bodhisattva and all of her golden beauty. And she is seated there with her hands in a teaching mode. And she had a particular role in trying to bring comfort and peace to people who were suffering. And you can just imagine meditating on her with a sweet smile, how that would be achieved. Next to her is a very different one. It is, again, in our collection, the Virgin Mary, and in this case, the Virgin Mary of Sorrows, and her twisted and agonized body, and her clutched hands you can almost feel the pressure of the fingers against each other, speak sharply to the role of the Christian tradition of trying to help evoke the sense of suffering that Christ went through and share that with the believers. This particular one has a beautiful presence to her and is upstairs in the galleries. And then finally, the 𝗛𝗵𝗄𝗃𝗃, one of my favorite pieces in the museum's collection, is in the African collection. And what he is doing with his shoulders back and his head lifted up is he was the center of the community. He was both a judge, he was, excuse me, I jumped ahead, I apologize. He was a judge, and he was, we're just taking a pause here because I've gotten lost. We're not panicking. Excuse me. I didn't mean to lose my thought. The 𝗛𝗵𝗂𝗃𝗃 is a remarkable figure in the Congo culture, and this is a 19th or 20th century version of the 𝗛𝗵𝗂𝗃𝗃 because he was a healer and he brought justice. He could deal with sick people, and his huge paquette where the belly button is sticking out is filled with medicinal herbs. And so as a figure in the community, he was the one that you went and saw to solve problems that could either be disputes in the community or because somebody in your family was sick. There are many places in the world, and I'm sure you've traveled, in your travels you've been to them, where works of art decorate or physical spaces. And this amazing piece of the Eisenheim altarpiece by Grunwald is really a message of hope. And you might look at that and say, I wonder what she's thinking. But actually, this was done for the monastery, the Order of St. Anthony, and in Eisenheim. And today, it's now in a church, it's now in a museum. But originally, it was done because the monks who were taking care of the people who came, it was really palliative care because people, they thought that viewing Christ's suffering, which you can see in the middle and the different stages he's being readied for his tomb below, would help the people who were recovering from this St. Anthony's fire disease, which was sounds like an incredible condition because it was caused by the rye. The rye would get in, what is it called? Fungus in it. And it caused the bread that was eaten, made out of this particular rye, caused a terrible disease. And it allowed people, it attacked their brains, and they went into twisted convulsions, and they often had restricted blood flow to their arms, and the disease goes on. And so the belief was that by looking at this picture of this beautiful painting of Christ in his suffering, that they would be relieved of some of theirs. A very different approach to all of this, which again is at the Metropolitan Museum, many of you have seen this over the years, is this extraordinary Young Dynasty. We're having a moment here. Fresco that is on the wall. I just can't imagine how they got it from China to the United States. It was done about 1319, and you see the green Buddha in the center with his mandala, and on either side of him are two of his bodhisattvas and 12 of his warriors who are supporting him in this imagery. Around him, all are working to help heal you. The Bodhisattva of medicine is one that we have a number of pieces in our galleries. When you go upstairs, you can enjoy seeing them. But this was another example of the kind of pilgrimage people would take in this case to come and see this particular Buddha of medicine. There are many stories like the ones I've been telling you in the history of medicine, and of course, one of them, most powerful, really is focused around the ideas and the tragedies that are a part of the Great Plagues. And I'm going to share with you a few of the Great Plagues. Now, I'm not going to read all of this. During the pandemic, I did a series of lectures on the plagues, helping people to understand the huge economic and social changes that occurred during each of the plagues. As we know now, masks were really invented and understood to be part of the protection process during the Renaissance. During the Spanish flu, distancing became a part of the way in which the care was being identified. That is trying to keep your 6 feet from each other. Each of the pandemics had its own special contribution to public health. Probably all of you have seen this images of this painting of the triumph of Death by Peter Bruegel, and this jam-packed painting, which was done in 1562, is in the Prado, and it really is tells the story of the triumph of death. You can see that he is down here in the corner closest to me on a starving horse, and in the back of the carriage are the skulls of all the people that have died. And as he moves through the community, he points out people who will come and join in this terrible devastation that's going on, which was the plague. The images of these stories really document, and there's so many of them, it makes for an incredible lecture about how things can be beautiful and horrific at the very same time, because the entire content of this painting is about decimation and death. The Spanish flu, as many of you know, took place during World War I, and in some reports that I read, more people died of the Spanish flu than died on the terrible in the war. What's important to take away from the Spanish flu is that it is a variation of COVID, which we suffer from today, but it also was documented heavily in the war effort, because artists were sent, like John Singer Sargent, to document what was going on. And you can see in this watercolor that he did of soldiers recovering in their beds, that feeling of being completely wasted and exhausted. And this serious worldwide epidemic caused many millions of people to die during that 3-year period. On the far side is a wonderful self-portrait of Edvard Munch, the very famous Norwegian painter. And we have a number of his works in the DMA's collection. Munch here, it's so extraordinary to look at this piece of art, because he is sick and enfeebled. He meets our gaze even though his eyes are completely sunken in. His hair is thinning and his body posture is slouched. He's dressed in a heavy gown. All of us who have had the flu know how cold you get despite having a fever. And he is just in front of his unmade sickbed that's behind him. The picture is a simple one, but it's also a portrait, and a very human portrait, of an individual trying to recover from this very severe illness that he had. This picture belongs to the late phases of Munch's work, and he returned to continue to paint after this, but it took him a while, as many of us know who have had it, to be able to gain his strength back. HIV/AIDS, which became a worldwide pandemic in 1981 and is still prevalent today, was documented by so many artists who lost their lives, and 2 of them are up here, Keith Haring and Felix Gonzalez-Torres. What's remarkable to me about these works were here photography is used heavily to illustrate the transitions in AIDS, and so many of the pictures, again, come to my other lecture, were really about the individuals in their beds or being cared for by their friends and family when they no longer were so emaciated and weak that they couldn't get into a bath or they couldn't get in and out of bed. These are pictures and stories that are of AIDS that are really about the tragedy that people were so afraid of the AIDS victims. We didn't understand how the virus was transmitted. And then secondly, not only was there the fear and loss that you're going on, but these are examples of the wonderful stories that we see in Renaissance art of memento moris, stories of the world passing. And I look at the Felix Gonzalez-Torres and often think about that as such a simple thing as a clock reminds us of the heartbeat of 2 individuals, one passed before the other, but it's really an everyday experience captured in time. More recently, and still going on, because I talked to at least 5 people today who had just recovered from COVID, so keep your mask on. It came and attacked us, as I note there, on March 11th, 2020. It really has made a huge number, has caused a huge number of deaths. Happily, the vaccine came a year later. The scenes of, there was that wonderful period where artists and photographers captured when the world stopped and nobody was driving and nobody, the businesses were all closed. And this was an example of Dallas during that time. I can never imagine the freeways not being filled with people, or 𝗵𝗵 up in the top. When the DMA opened in the fall of 2020, we're so happy to note that it presented Carrie Weems' remarkable posters that reminded us that we will, don't worry, we will come together again, and we will hold hands, and we will be strong. And these were all over very, very poignant reminders of that. Another whole chapter, which I'm going to try to slip through, is the story of human anatomy and some of the artists who made huge contributions to that. This is an example of Rembrandt showing an anatomy drawing when it was really intended as a series of portraits of Dr. 𝗛𝗲𝗹 and his colleagues who were in this particular Surgeons Guild. And so they're all gathered around, and the intention was really to have their portraits painted. And if you look carefully, nobody's really looking at the dissection that's going on down there. They're all sort of posing their heads to look at you, except for one man. But it was, they paid accordingly for their amount of their face that was shown. But what's remarkable about this is that Rembrandt was a young man when he did this, and it gives you a sense of the dead corpse and the arm being examined at that time. As we move through, really, I'm only covering the Western traditions. I'm not going into the Muslim, the whole traditions in Chinese and Japanese, and it's endless what's out there and how different the drawings were and how different cultures dealt with dissections. But we're skipping ahead and looking at Galen, who was from ancient Greece, as you can see by the dates. What he did was really influence medical science from this date, which is, early Christian era, up until the Renaissance. So for hundreds of years, Galen's drawings were thought to be the most accurate. The problem is that he did much of his physiological studies on pigs. And so there was a kind of gap, and you can see if you look at his drawings across the way there, that he did the best he could, but he did not revolutionize biology. That didn't really happen until the anatomy of the human body was studied through dissection. But he was, in fact, the first, and for hundreds of years, physicians used Galen's drawings as their studies. In the 13th and 14th century, dissections were often prohibited, but the church began to allow religious and for religious purposes, But very importantly, beginning in the 14th century and the expansion of medical schools, they began to allow human dissection as a way in which to study the human body. And here we're looking at, you can see the full page of the manuscript over there, beautifully done and, hand lettered and hand painted. And this is a detail of that painting, that you see there. And you can see that they're really doing the dissection of the cadaver, and it now is becoming more of a regular event. What I think is curious is that the cadavers were of people who had died of many causes. Many times they were criminals. Sometimes they were just people who were found in unfortunate situations, but it was none of the people in this picture have a mask on, and you can only imagine the smell that would happen if you were dissecting a human body after several days. There is no question that Leonardo da Vinci was perhaps the best known anatomical illustrator, and he led the way, having done 30 corpses. He dissected 30 human corpses. He started doing this when he was 20 years of age. And he did drawings and sketchings of these amazing procedures in the most lifelike and realistic ways. And I'll just show you two examples. Of course, as you know, Leonardo wrote backwards, but his pages of these illustrations, many of which can be found in London at one of the museums there. And it was, he conducted these post-mortem autopsies, and he was granted very special permissions due to being an artist and also because it was used in teaching purposes. He carried out his own dissections, and these recordings that you're seeing here show both the muscles, the tissues, and even the nerves. And it was that level of detail that made him one of the most significant and prolific illustrators. These 500-year-old drawings of Leonardo's, he, on the far side, it's a description of a heart of a man he dissected who had died at 100 years of age. And it's the first known example of illustration of cardiac disease, in which he noted that the arteries were clogged, and he collected the debris that he found in the arteries. He also drew the valves and noted that how the blood was flowing through the aorta into the heart, and what he understood was the pulse and the valves, and the way this would strengthen further the physician's understanding of how to treat injuries and diseases of the heart. The other illustration close to me is an example, amazing example, of the fetus in a woman's womb. And he was very, very interested in that because it was not only something that was sacred in many ways, but also so important for him to understand. And you can see what I think so interesting in these drawings is that he's really moving around the entire way in which the fetus was held in the uterus. He noted all of these notations on his notebooks were critical to further understanding of what his dissections were about. Very importantly, much of this information did not appear during his lifetime, and his notebooks were found after his death and then became studied and published. 𝗔𝗲𝗵𝗴𝗔 is an incredible anatomy illustrator of the 16th century in the Flemish tradition. And he is the author of one of the most important books on human anatomy. And I'll show you that in just a minute. And he is referred to as the founder of human anatomy. And he was a surgeon and an anatomist. I went over to UT Southwestern and was the archivist opened up the book. They have a copy of 𝗔𝗲𝗵𝗴𝗔. It's huge. It's this big, is how big the drawings were. It's really extraordinary. And you can see here the illustration of the back of a man, and then on the other side are all the notes that went along with him. In his case, skip all the gruesome parts, but try to focus on the importance of his contribution, because Vesalius's he also did public dissections, which took place sometimes in churches and sometimes in the medical schools. And this was very important because it expanded people's understanding. Physicians could come, medical students could come, as well as the public. And there's some pictures of where he's dissecting a body, and there's rafters of people up above him. One of the extraordinary illustrators of the human body was William Hunter from Scotland. And this incredible example is a combination of work between an anatomist and an obstetrician named Hunter, who was very focused on a pregnancy and the dissection of a woman, in this case, who had died near the end of her term, as you can see. But he argued that this was important to document so doctors could understand more fully what womb was like, how the baby would come through the birth canal, etc. In these incredible anatomy drawings, he was accompanied by an artist whose Dutch name I'm not capable of pronouncing, but he helped to bring out the detail that you can see in these selections. Probably everybody knows the Grey's Anatomy. Have you all heard of that? Well, here's your fact to go home with tonight. Henry Grey was born in 1827 and died in 1861. His book, which was on Grey's Anatomy, was published in the United Kingdom in 1858. A recent update of his Grey's Anatomy was published on November 24th, 2004. So for 160 years, Grey's Anatomy, and every physician I talk to talks about Grey's Anatomy, refers to it, and they all proudly go into their libraries and pull it out and bring it to me. A lot of changes going on with AI and also with the use of virtual reality. Now doctors can plan ahead to see how they're going to conduct their surgeries. They can see the body parts in 3 dimensions and see how the blood is flowing. It's extraordinary. Also during the pandemic, one of the things that the people at the Center for Disease Control wanted to do was not only for the physicians, but also for the public, help them to understand what was going on in terms of medical illustrations. And so Alyssa Eckhart and her team created the first illustration of the COVID virus. And you can see all the details here of the different proteins that are so much a part of this particular disease are marked. What's important is that another artist working alongside the team, Luke German, did this same thing in glass. And this actually, there's a beautiful movie, if you look him up online, where he illustrates, makes a note that this is the coronavirus, but it's made out of glass. And the reason he did that, which you can see up there, is that there is no color to a virus. And so this helped scientists to understand what was going on, and very importantly, is a beautiful work of art. Here we're going into the next chapter, Artists in Healing. I have identified over 150 artists throughout time and history that have had different types of medical diseases and chronicled their work and their traditions of recovery. I think that there are 4 things that really stand out when you look at and read about artists and their healing process. First, it helps them with pain management. As you look at this amazing photograph of Renoir, who is crippled, his whole body was crippled for a long time by rheumatoid arthritis. You can see his hands in this, they were claw-like, they describe. And so pain management, he painted every day until he died. It helps with immune support, because if you're in a positive place, that's important. Strengthens their resilience, their will to live. And he also helps with cognitive function, being present in the world and solving problems. Here are a group of artists in the DMA's collection that have had physical illnesses. Félix González-Torres, of course, had AIDS. 𝗛𝗲𝗄𝗏 the filmmaker, had a very rare disease he got called transverse myelitis, a disorder which caused the inflammation in his spinal cord and crippled him for life. And so he does all of his work from a wheelchair. And then, of course, Marc Dussouvereau, which is a incredible artist that is all over Dallas, had his accident in 1960 and unfortunately went through many surgeries and a long period of recovery, and is now, as we know, in a wheelchair. All of this caused by one of his sculptures falling on him. Pierre-Auguste Renoir started out his incredible career as an impressionist. He was loved making these works of art. Most people are unaware that he had to adapt as his eyesight began to dwindle, and also as his rheumatoid arthritis changed his ability to paint the way he did when he was a young man. Here's a comparison between two works of art. You can see the dates down below. The one closest to me of the Great Bathers, which was one of his favorite subject matter. I think Renoir loved women, and he loved us in our fleshy abundance. So I love his work. But you can see how pristine the painting is, how colorful and light the images are, and how they are playful and move together, splashing in the water and talking with each other. The later work is more subdued. You can see it's fuzzier, and that has a lot to do with his ability to make the brushstrokes. Very importantly, the change in the way in which the landscape and the figures are interrelated is differently. And for Renoir, at this time, you can see the sort of separation of the figures. They begin to blend into the background where you don't have that sense in his earlier work. This is one of among the last pieces that he did, and you can see in the photograph, Renoir is actually painting this amazing portrait of 𝗛𝗲𝗹𝗶, who is at the Metropolitan Museum. And I love this because you can imagine her just sitting a little bit beyond, and he's staring at her as he captures her beautiful figure on canvas. Again, late in life, the looseness of his brushstroke, but he still captures the beauty of her smile and her face because, as I said, Renoir loved women. Undaunted by a huge change in his life, Henri Matisse had to radically change the way in which he produced art after 1941. He was still a young man, but he had endured a severe cancer surgery, and unfortunately, it didn't allow him to stand up. And as a result of the necrosis, he had a deficit in his abdominal muscles that impeded him for the remaining of his life. And you can see him here drawing from his bed. He didn't care where he was going to draw, but he was going to draw. Throughout his lifetime, he did beautiful paintings, many of which we have in the DMA collection, sculptures, some beautiful ones over at the Nasher, and also here at the DMA, and later in his life, his wonderful cutouts. The DMA's great piece, which the Ivy, which is now touring, but we saw in the show last fall, is a prime example of what he did with the cutouts, where he had the paper beautifully colored, and then he did the designs. Sometimes his assistants helped with cutting out and placing the pieces on the, this is a maquette or a drawing done to, it is on a canvas, but he did this as an example for a church's window, and he did not get to see this actually implemented, but this assemblage of these large and colorful shapes is very characteristic of his work. Frida Kahlo, my heart weeps when I see her work. Just look at the length of her, the number of tragedies that she went through, beginning at age 6 with polio, and then she had that terrible accident in 1925, which left her seriously disabled. Her pelvis was crushed, her shoulders, etc. And she had 32 operations, major operations, before her death in 1954. 32. And in the last years of her life, she had to have her leg amputated from gangrene, and after that, she retired to her villa in Mexico and had to live on wheelchairs and crutches. Undaunted by all of that, she tells a story through her art and through her self-portrait, which is extraordinary. And it is the power of resilience as she faces you directly, looking at you unwaveringly, that she will survive, she will overcome the pain and the suffering that she's going to, as well as her ability to capture the horror. And if you've been in chronic pain or pain of a hospital surgeries, you know what I'm talking about. And these large back braces, which you can see one on her red dress over here, and then you see her body wrapped in it. This is what she suffered with, and these braces were enormously difficult to wear, and more importantly, they hurt her body, and she had to have help getting them on and getting them off. If you look at the broken column, you'll see little nails, which are almost like little tears all over. And that really, if you know that feeling of chronic pain, you know that's what it feels like. I don't think anybody in the history of art tells such a powerful story of suffering and beauty at the same time as Frida Kahlo does. Now we're turning to what everybody expects with artists, which is mental diseases. And of course, there were a lot of depression. There's no question about it. This would go on and on if I went to cover it. But here are some of the artists again in our collection. All of these individuals suffered from chronic illness, chronic illnesses as well as, very importantly, mental depression and alcoholism and different challenges that they had. Probably the most important that everybody knows about, so we'll skip through him, is Vincent van Gogh. His beautiful, his relationship with, and dealing with his depression really went on throughout his life. And he did a number of portraits of Dr. Guéchet, which was his physician, and a number of artists. That's another whole talk of artists and their physicians and how they interrelated. These three portraits, very close in date, but also give you a sense of how he began to, some people say his mind began to be challenged and deteriorate. You can see a difference in the brushstrokes, you can see a difference in the color palettes, and he did a large number of self-portraits during his lifetime. Just before he died, he spent almost a year in a hospital in Arles, Saint-Remy. And this is a photograph of the garden in the spring, and you can see one of the many photographs, many paintings that he made at Saint-Remy. Among those very famous ones is the Starry Night, and that was actually painted when he was in the hospital along with a number of his great masterpieces. He liked being in the hospital. Dr. Guéchet was taking care of him. He felt safe in this confined area, and looking out the window at the landscape and the sky around him, somehow the containment helped to stabilize him. When he got out of the hospital, he did a series of paintings in 1890, just before his unfortunate death. And we have one of them, the great 𝗔𝗲𝗄𝗏, which when you look at, it's hard to believe, that this was done shortly before his death. But his incredible joyfulness of looking at color and at the dynamism of nature was a part of Van Gogh's life. Jackson Pollock, too much alcohol was really his problem. He died, as many of us know, in a tragic car accident. He painted fearlessly and ferociously. There's no other way to describe it. We know that he had bipolar, and he was being treated for that, along with alcoholism, which he was not willing to be treated for. But there are a number of pieces in the DMA, and I selected this one because it's so like the cathedral, which was done in 1947. This piece is done later, and what's amazing about it, it's called A Portrait in a Dream. And so you see this incredible image of what we assume is, he calls it a portrait of himself on the far side, looking directly at you, but also there's a change in color and in the use of lines that begin to complicate what the image of the face is about. And then you see the dream on the side closer to me. And the extraordinary thing about the dream is that it is so vibrant and so full. And so together they really are telling a story, which we don't often see what's inside the mind of an artist. kusama's coming back on view, and I decided to just mention her again. She lives in Tokyo and is treated and lives actually in a hospital, and then gets up in the morning and goes across the street and works in her studio, and then she comes back. She likes that sense of familiarity to her routine. Many people describe her as being an obsessive compulsive, which I think is pretty clear to say when you look at one of her breakthrough paintings, these wonderful rooms that she did that you walk in and the entire room is filled with dots. This is our kusama, all eternal love, and I have all eternal love, I have for pumpkins, which we acquired, and a very important piece, and it will be up later this spring. But you can see, again, where her obsessive nature of multiple dots of paint, each covering the different pumpkins, and they are both earth-like and represent regeneration, as well as endlessly atomizing particles in space. And so as you go in this room, you and the pumpkins become one. And it's a lot of fun, but it's also can be intense. So please see it. Last round of artists are those with eye diseases. Rembrandt is supposed to have had a wandering eye, which also affected his ability to focus. That is recorded in a number of his journals. Mary Cassatt, of course, and George O'Keeffe both unhappily had retinopathy, which causes you to go blind in your later years. Both of them had to stop painting at a particular point. And of course, Chuck Close, who we know today is another wonderful artist whose ability to do close-up interventions of the human face is largely caused by his ability to need the eyesight issues that he's had to overcome. Degas, his vision began declining in the 1860s. So he was only in his 30s when he began to realize that he had vision problems. And he was in the Franco-Prussian War, and there are some accounts that it really disturbed his eyesight at that time. He also went off, and this is a wonderful portrait that he did of his cousin, Estelle Mousson, which is at the New Orleans Museum of Art, and she had lost her vision to eye problems. And he is probably one of the best-known artists that combated these retinal and progressive eye diseases. And in particular, he was sensitive to light, which caused problems with his central vision. Unlike many of the other Impressionists, almost all of Degas' works were painted inside. He did not go out and do plein air paintings. Here are two examples, different dates of works in some ways that help you understand Degas' work as he aged. Again, 1874, the ballerinas are pristine white movements. He excelled at defining the forms and suggested movements. And you also can see a lot of detail in the faces. The later piece on the right is of Four Dancers and is one of the largest of his late works. But here we're looking at the four dancers in their costumes in what looks like a landscape rather than the individual studio. And again, he did this in large measure because the descriptive details that we see over here were harder for him to achieve because of his eyesight. And he loved emphasizing the form of the body moving, and you can see that in the arms in that particular portrait, Four Dancers image that are all located on our side of the on my side of the painting, excuse me. Some of the late works that he did, although it's very important to note that Degas throughout his life did sculptures, but here are some of them, this beautiful piece from the National Sculpture Center, and also one that we have at the DMA of a mother, of a masseuse, manipulating a body. What's important about these works is that sometimes you can actually see, Margaret had one where you could see the thumbprint of Degas, which he purposely left there to sort of allow it his signature in a way, the human touch. But all of these works are very important and really complex images once you begin to study them closely. The reclining figure that you see on the far side with the leg swooping forward and the leg, I would not want to be in this position being massaged like this, I can tell you, is also captures our attention to the detail that he was able to do in his great knowledge of the human body and anatomy. Of course, we all know the story of Monet. Many researchers agree that the effect of the cataracts, which came throughout his later works, was really something that he underwent. And unfortunately, as you can see by the dates up there, he was diagnosed very early, but he did not, he started to show symptoms, then he was diagnosed, and he didn't have surgery until 1923. And that's 2 years before his death. So what's important to note is that long period in between, he didn't want to have cataract surgery because his friend, 𝗛𝗲𝗹𝗶𝘴 lost her sight as a result of the cataract surgery. So he was very afraid of that. But you can see him here in his wonder, creating the great series for Paris, that is now in Paris, the great water lilies, and I love this, I use this one because the blues and the greens are so powerful. This slide shows you the kind of development that his eyes went through, starting off with our Monet water lilies on the closest started to me. As I mentioned, his eyesight started to fail in 1912, and he had surgery in 23. So you begin to see his eyesight is failing by 1918. He's losing the ability to see certain colors, particularly blues and greens. And then he had his surgery, and then after his surgery, he began to be able to see multiple colors again. And in his writings, he noted this all the time, recorded that he knew he was having difficulty. This is the same image seen in the in his garden. And you can see the difference in the color palettes. They say everything that is needed to understand what happens after cataract surgery. I remember when I had mine, I couldn't believe the sky was blue. I thought everything had turned brown for my lifetime. So the last section is that we're going to look very quickly are artists, contemporary artists who deal with the intersection of art and science, and many of them are using, as we can see here, different machines or different technology, like you see the X-ray in the middle with 𝗛𝗲𝗋𝗋. I'll just talk about that one, where the pink clouds are blooming against the stark blue back. But this is where he is, his image is really of the flowing tendrils and underwater paint that it doesn't look like a human body until you really begin to focus in on it. And what he's done is manipulate X-rays and help us to understand the flow of blood. So he was both a physician and an artist. On the far side is 𝗔𝗿𝗋𝗋𝗋. As many of you know, he had cancer, and these are his cancer cells. And over here, Lisa Nielsen, this is inspired by Fra Angelico's Annunciation of the angel, and she's using a Japanese mulberry paper and incredible craft of quilting to make the face. Can you see the face in there, and then the cranium? So these are artists that are using new technologies and science. As I think a lot of you know, I've had challenges with my lungs over the years, and so I became obsessed with artists who depict them, and I'm only picking a few to show you today. One of them that I really love is this example of Annie Cantrell, where she does these very large-scale and complicated glass sculptures with all the detail of the trachea and the philia that is coming down, the rods, the glass really gets heated and she forms them. And for those of us like myself, which know what it's like to breathe in and breathe out, she makes it visible and beautiful at showing the shadows and the textures. So this is one artist. Very different approach. I had 10, I'm only showing you 2. Deborah Baxter, who took alabaster and glass and bronze and metal. And so that's the antithesis of what lungs are about. Everything here is rigid, and she produces these sculptures almost as if they're jewelry. A very famous piece in the 𝗛𝗲𝗶𝗴𝗴 collection, the Bloodhead, which is another form of portraiture. And he has actually taken 5.6 ounces of his, liters, of his own, or 10 pints of his own blood, frozen into the form of his face. And it's, I know they may be hard to look at, but they're very important to understand that this is another approach by an artist to use the human body and really incorporating it into his work of art. You can see as he ages, the different images of his face change just like he does. And so Mark Quinn has pledged to produce every 5 years a catalog of the aging process that he goes through. So he keeps producing these. CT scans have given us artists a whole new way in which to look into creating works of art. And this we're looking at a glass portrait by Angela Palmer. And what she has done is take CT scans of herself. And if you look at the far one, you'll see that it's a series of sliced CT scans. And then if you break them apart, this is how you look at them. So she's amplified as you're looking at the individual glass slices of her brain and her portrait, a sort of a very poignant way in which to see the mouth open, how the brain is working, and she is allowing the viewer really to see three-dimensional drawings on a two-dimensional scale. So quite an extraordinary piece. And this I'm going to share with you as my last slide, and JD's going to turn on an incredible short movie.
This is what consciousness looks like. Yourself reflected.
I encourage you to go to Greg's website. He and his, Greg Dunn is an artist and a neuroscientist, and he's partnered with Brian Edwards, who's an artist and an applied physicist. And together they've created this way in which to capture through imagery the functioning of the brain, and then to illustrate it through the use of, by coloring it. I think they're so extraordinary because it's the work that I'm doing now, which is our 3-pound little brain, is such a magnificent thing, and we're still learning so much about it. I know I've gone on too long, and you've been incredibly patient, but I just want to thank you and for this opportunity, and also remind you that the arts and healing are intertwined and have been since man stepped on earth, and it is very important to recognize this powerful role that they play. So I'll take questions if anybody has any. I know we're a little late, but we started late. Does anybody have any questions?
I think they're mesmerized.
Oh, no. I think I wore them out is what I did.
You know what? Thanks, Bonnie. And I know some of you all signed up for the tour afterwards. We're going to meet in front of the beautiful floral design that was done by the DMA League Floral Committee. So I think one of them who worked on it is here, Cindy Williams, if you'll raise your hand. Anyway, so if we'll meet by the beautiful flowers, that'd be wonderful. And Bonnie, thank you so much. That was spectacular.